Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Morning, everyone. Okay, so unfortunately, Zoom decided to have an update overnight, which means that all of my chosen settings have changed, which included not having to put passwords in. So I will look into that and change it again, so it's a lot easier. Apologies for all of the faffing about trying to get that sorted, but here we are now. It's lovely to see new people. That's always really nice. So I look forward to getting to know you a little bit better as we go through the session. Okay, so this morning we are going to be learning a little bit about ancient Egypt, and what I've tried to do is pick all of the most important parts, in my opinion, and just give you a little bit of a taster into all of those different bits. And then there's a little bit on the end if you'd like to go away and do some more research. So our learning objective is to gain a basic understanding of ancient Egypt and its main parts. But first, we're going to try something new that we've never done before. You all have an option to be able to annotate and draw on the slide. So if you could find that option where you can draw on the slide, and then what I'd like you to do is to all draw a circle, a square, whatever you like, where you think Egypt is on this map. So if someone could start drawing for me where they think Egypt is, so I can see that it's working, that would be brilliant. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I'll give you about 20 seconds to have a go at that.
It is, yeah.
Did I get it right?
Yeah, you did, but we got apparently there's somewhere where you can draw on it.
Yeah, I know. I think it's
No, that's share screen. Oh, is that it there?
could be.
That looks. Oops. What should we do here? No.
No, go circle.
No, he wanted to know where Egypt was.
Okay, I'll give it 5 more seconds, and then if no one's drawn, I'll assume that we can't find that feature. It's not very helpful that I don't have the same screen as you, otherwise I'll be able to tell you. Oh, someone's done it.
Oh, I think I know where it is.
Go on then. Unmute it. Yeah, but it won't let you click on it, darling. Sort of, it's gone shaded.
Yeah, it's not going to let us do it.
Let's mute back up then.
Okay, we'll wait a couple more seconds because some people have found it, so we'll just give everyone an opportunity, and then we'll move on. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so that sort of worked, sort of didn't, but maybe some of you know how to do that, so we could try and have a go at that in the future. And what we might do is set up just a little test of Zoom where we can all just have a go at drawing and work that one out ourselves. Okay, so I can see somebody has put the circle in Europe and somebody has put it in Africa. I can tell you that one of you is correct, and it is the person that put it in Africa. Okay, so it is located in the northeast corner of Africa, right on the border before you start going into the Arab countries in the Middle East. Okay, something else that is really important. Okay, I've just noticed those annotations are now going to stay on every single slide. I'm not sure how to get rid of that, so we will just have to make do with that, that's fine. Oh, one's disappeared, brilliant. Okay, so another really important part about Egypt that not a lot of people realise is the River Nile, which runs all the way from Kenya all the way up to Egypt and then goes into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the River Nile was really important during this time, as this is where everybody in Egypt settled. So they all settled along the river as it was a source of water for drinking and eating, as using for cooking, but it also allowed them to farm and grow crops and feed animals and things like that. So the River Nile was really, really important. And if you ever go to Egypt, you'll notice that pretty much everything is all along the River Nile because it was a really important part of the ancient empire. So some quick facts. So 6000 BC is when the ancient Egyptian empire started, which is about 6,500 years ago. So the first Egyptians settled on the River Nile and they used clay to make basic pottery. Between then and 3100 BC, about 5,300 years ago, farmers began farming sheep and cattle using sailboats, and around 3500 BC, hieroglyphics were invented. Hieroglyphics was the Egyptian writing, but we'll cover that a little bit more in a bit. Pharaoh Nama was the first pharaoh of Egypt, thus starting the first dynasty. So each time a new pharaoh came into power, a new dynasty started. It was just a posh word of describing the time period of that pharaoh ruling. There were 30 dynasties in total, and the Egyptian empire came to an end in 332 BC after the invasion of Alexander the Great, and after this it was ruled by ancient Greece. So we're going to be covering some of ancient Egypt from about 6000 BC to 330 BC, which is a very, very long time period. So that's why I've just chosen some of the most important parts. Okay, so another important part of ancient Egypt was their social hierarchy, which basically means the order in which people were valued and how much money you might have had. And this was something that was very important and significant in ancient Egypt. As if you were at the bottom, it was basically impossible to move up. So it all depended on what family you were born into. Right at the bottom, we had our farmers and slaves, who you could argue did most of the work, and without them the rest of ancient Egypt and the empire wouldn't have been able to work, but they were at the bottom. Above that we had our craftsmen who made things like pottery, weapons, things like that. We had our soldiers and scribes. Our scribes were the people that wrote the scrolls that we've later dug up today. Our nobles and priests, who were the religious men. The visors, who were basically the supervisors to the pharaoh, and then right on the top we had the pharaoh, which is a bit like our modern day king and queen or prime minister, something like that. So that was the order in which everybody had their place, and like I say, it was very hard, nearly impossible if you were at the bottom to move up at all. So pretty much most of us today would probably be somewhere in the craftsmen, farmers and slaves bit, which is a little bit upsetting, but unfortunately that's where most of us would be. Okay, so hieroglyphics. Before we carry on, did everyone bring paper and a pen or pencil? If you didn't, quickly grab some now. Otherwise, we can get started on this. So the first invention of reading and writing was by the ancient Egyptians, and it used hieroglyphics, which basically means religious symbols. So they used lots of symbols for their letters. And to make it more difficult, it could be written in any direction. So it could go round in a circle, it could go left to right, it could go right to left, up and down and up. It could go in any direction. And the way that they worked out how to read it was to look at the eyes on some of the symbols, and whichever way the eyes were facing was the way you could read the writing. So it was very confusing. And because it was very confusing and really hard to learn, it was mainly used by pharaohs and rich people. The poor people had a more easier writing system called the Hydo, but we won't be learning about that today. So what I'd like you to do is, we've got a couple of minutes because we're unfortunately we're going to run out of a bit of time. We might have to skip through a couple of things because we started a little bit late, but that's nobody's fault. That's mine for not realizing it updated. So what I'd like you to do is, using your pen and paper, I'd like you to have a go at writing your name using hieroglyphics. So I'll give you about 2 minutes, have a go at writing your name, and then when you're finished, we'll go through and we can see everybody's examples. I will be doing mine as well. I just need to grab a pen. So off you go, you've got 2 minutes. I appreciate that some of them might be quite tricky, so just try your best. I'm not a very good drawer either, so I'm just trying my best. Okay, you got about 1 more minute and then we'll move on. If you're not quite finished, that's okay, because I'll send the video to your parents and then you can have a go later on as well, or finish up. Okay, freeze. Okay, it's fine if you haven't finished. Like I say, I will send this to your parents later on and it will be on YouTube, so you can pause it when we get to this bit and you can either finish up or you can have a go at writing some other things, like your pet's names or your mum and dad's name or something like that. So I will show mine first. I hope you can all see it. It's not the best drawing because I'm not very good at drawing, but it's N-A-T-H-A-N. So Nathan is my name, just in case nobody knew, but I hope you all knew that already. So if you could just show me yours on the camera, that would be brilliant, or what you've done so far. Super, 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 super. Brilliant. Cool. Okay, so like I said, people like us, if we were born in ancient Egypt, wouldn't really use hieroglyphics. It was mostly used by rich men, pharaohs, noblemen, things like that. But I just thought it'd be a little bit of fun for you to start getting your head around how confusing their writing system was. And also, you'd have to be able to read that. And I hear you ask, how did we figure out what each letter means? Well, sometime in the 20th century, we found what was called the Rosetta Stone. And now this is in a British museum. And on here, it was basically like the dictionary of every single hieroglyphic symbol. So I believe it was a French historian discovered it and began translating each symbol to a modern day letter. And because of the discovery of that stone, that's how we discovered how to read hieroglyphics. So without that stone, we would have no idea what all of those symbols mean. Okay, so ancient Egyptian architecture. Now, most of you would probably think of pyramids straight away. So I thought we'd have a little look at some pyramids. The first one we're going to have a look at is the Step Pyramid at, I believe it's Saqqara. I could be wrong, but that was my attempt. It's the earliest pyramid that we know of, and it's still there today. It was built in 2630 BC, so a very, very long time ago. It was the burial place of King Djoser, who we believe is one of the first pharaohs, but not the very first. And it's the architect of the Step Pyramid was designed by Imhotep, and it rose in 6 giant steps like this. So it was just 6 big steps going up in steps, basically, and it was the burial place of a king. So this was a very early day, very basic pyramid. The next pyramid we'll look at was much more sophisticated. You can just see it in the back there. It was about 3 times as big and had many, many more components to it. So it was the most famous of all the pyramids, and it is the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's also the largest pyramid that there is, full stop. They were built in 2528 BC, which means it's more than 4,500 years old. And it was the tallest building in the world for about 4,000 years until the 20th century. So until the 1900s began, it was the tallest building in the world. And it is built from over 2 million blocks. So the slaves would have had to have carried 2 million blocks. They were massive as well, absolutely huge blocks that would have had to carry them and start building them up in layers all the way to the top. Unfortunately, though, lots of those blocks were later taken out and used to build the city of Cairo. So a lot of the blocks that are there today aren't the original blocks. They're replacements and replicas to sort of show us what it would have looked like. So lots of the real blocks were ground up and then remade into smaller bricks to build the city of Cairo. So some other quick facts about pyramids. There are still over 80 pyramids in Egypt today, and they are all more than 3,000 years old. And they were always created in a straight line to match up with star constellations or to have the sun hit them at a certain time of day or something like that. So they were very spiritual, very religious, and believed that that would have an impact on the person who was buried inside. Because they were the burial places of kings, they were full of treasure, lots of gold, lots of jewels, lots of shiny things. So robbers were always trying to break into them to steal the gold and the treasures. So as a result, each pyramid had one real entrance and lots of other fake entrances. So you would walk in and then you'd get trapped inside, or there'd be hidden doors, or you'd hit a dead end and things like that. So there was lots and lots of traps and confusing ways for the pyramids to try and stop robbers from stealing all the gold. They were almost impossible to move, the doors anyway. So even if the robbers managed to open the door, there might be a blank wall behind it. So it would then take a lot of time for them to be able to break into the pyramids. However, despite all of that, nearly every single pyramid was cleared out and robbed eventually. So nearly everything was taken over a certain period of time. Okay, another important architectural structure from Egypt are their temples. I appreciate these pictures are a little bit blurry. For some reason, there doesn't seem to be many clear images of these temples, so I had to choose the best of a bad bunch. But the temples in Egypt are another really significant architectural sort of part of ancient Egypt's history. Because they were very religious, they did build lots of temples that had lots of intricate design and artwork around them. So this is something else you might want to go away and have a look at as well, because not many people know about the temples. Most people just jump straight to pyramids. Okay, so pharaohs are next important part of ancient Egypt. They were the rulers of Egypt, and they were seen as both men and gods by not only holy people, but by the farmers and the slaves and everybody that we looked at on that hierarchy. So they were seen as men and God. Typically, it did have to be a man that ruled Egypt, but there were some women, such as Hatshepsut and Cleopatra. They are the only two female pharaohs that we know of. Hatshepsut was quite early on, and Cleopatra was nearly at the end. So people believe that pharaohs could speak to the gods, so therefore their words were always taken and obeyed. So they were seen as very, very important, special people because they were able to talk to gods. Now, there are lots and lots of pharaohs, but 11 famous and well-known pharaohs are those on that list. So if you'd like to do a bit of extra research, you can. We're going to have a look at two. I've added a 12th pharaoh down the bottom, which was Pepe II, because he was the youngest pharaoh, and he was 6 when he took the throne. So if you could imagine being 6 and being king of a country, that's what it would have been like for him. So he was suddenly king or pharaoh of a whole country, and he was only 6 years old. So that was a little bit crazy. So there's another one that I thought you might like to have a look at as well. So we're going to focus on Tutankhamun, who reigned between 1336 and 1327. He was better known as King Tut, and he was the ruler in the 18th dynasty. He wasn't that popular until his tomb was discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter. So whilst he was reigning, he wasn't that popular, and it was mostly because he was only 8 or 9 years old when he became pharaoh. So people didn't think that he was old enough to rule the kingdom and the empire. So he was 8 or 9 when he took over. Some of you are either 8 or nearly 9 or something like that. So can you imagine being king of a country at the age you are at now? So he reigned for about 10 years. Unfortunately, he died when he was 20. We're not sure how he died. It could have been a murder. He could have died from eating something dodgy. We're not sure. We don't know. We're not sure if we'll ever know. But his tomb was found in an excellent condition. We believe it had never been robbed, and it was sealed so well that everything he was buried with was still in there. So that was one of the best archaeological discoveries of ancient Egypt that we've ever made. Another important pharaoh, or I think is important, was Cleopatra, who reigned from 51 to 30 BC, so nearly at the end of the ancient empire. So Cleopatra VII was very intelligent and politically astute. So that means she was very clever and understood how the politics and how the system worked in Egypt. She was one of few queens that actually learned hieroglyphics. She had a son, who she claimed was the son of the Roman military general Caesar. He was another really important person in the Roman Empire. So she went to Rome to visit Caesar to inform her, but unfortunately he was assassinated when she got there. And on her way back to Egypt, her brother Caesarion was also assassinated. So people thought that somebody was trying to take out her family and anyone that was special to her to remove her from the throne, because people did not like a woman as a pharaoh, basically. They felt that she was an untrue pharaoh because she was a woman. So as a result, a war was started, and unfortunately she was driven out of Rome, where she fled to, back to Egypt. And unfortunately her children died, and she also died. So that was the end of her reign. So it was a little bit dramatic and quite upsetting, but unfortunately that's how Cleopatra's reign ended. Okay, another important part of ancient Egypt was mummification. So there were various steps to mummification, which included that the body was purified and washed. So when you died, your body was purified and washed. All of your organs inside your body were taken out and put into little jars. They filled the body with stuffing. They dried it out and placed it in a substance called natron, which drew out all the moisture in your body. So it dried you out like a raisin, made you all crisp. And then about 40 or 50 days after that, they removed the body, took out the stuffing, and then put new stuffing in, which was usually made of sawdust or linen. The body was then carefully wrapped in layers on every single part of the body. And this was to help preserve the body. And right at the end, a shroud was placed over the body, so a special oil or ointment to preserve the body. And then it was put into what was called a sarcophagus, which was either made of wood, or if you were a pharaoh, it was made of gold, and had lots and lots of pretty designs on the top of it. So it would have looked a little bit like this. So you would have died, you'd have all your organs removed, you'd be placed into the natron, you'd have your stuffing redone, you'd then be mummified, so you'd be wrapped up, and then you'd be placed inside a sarcophagus. And again, this was mainly only for rich people, because poor people wouldn't be able to afford this kind of treatment, as it was very, very expensive. Okay, so I appreciate that we've had to go through quite quickly. I didn't plan on going this quick, but unfortunately there is only a 40-minute time allowance, as I'm using the free one, and because we started a little bit late, it just means we ran out a bit of time. So what we haven't covered is quite a lot, so I've put together a little pack of what you could go away and carry on your research. So we haven't looked at the afterlife, another very important part of ancient Egypt. Egyptian gods, there was over, I think, 200 of them. Cities, daily life, the Great Sphinx, religion, art, canopic jars, which is what the body parts were put into, and mummification. Now, we have covered it just briefly then, but there is a lot more to it. And people believe that there was a lot of things we still don't understand about mummification. So there's some things you could go away and research a bit further. I have given a website link. It's an excellent resource to continue your research or find out anything we've spoken about today. But it's also a good website for anything in history. So if you are doing history as part of what your schools have set, then it's a really good website for that. So I will send that to your parents. Again, sorry for it being such a whistle-stop tour, a lot whistly more than I thought it was going to be, but unfortunately we are going to run out of time, so I've had to fly through it a bit quicker. So that is the end of our session today. So thank you very much for joining. You can all unmute yourself now if you want, and then we can sort of just say goodbye. You're welcome, you're welcome. Thank you to, I've forgotten Cheryl's children's name, so thank you Cheryl today, that was brilliant. And I'll let you know what the next session will be.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, no worries, thanks guys, see you later.
Bye.
Bye, bye.
Is it clapping for me and you?
That's good.